In a world that often asks for justice, fairness, and retribution, forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but of profound strength. It asks us to look beyond the immediate hurt and see instead the opportunity for growth and redemption, for both ourselves and others. It asks us to remember that no wrong is so deep, no hurt so great, that it cannot be healed through the simple yet powerful act of forgiving. True forgiveness is not just an act of charity or benevolence. Holding on to grudges, resentment, or anger for wrongs done to us is like carrying an unseen weight that drags us down, affecting not only our emotional well-being, but also our relationships, our choices, and ultimately our lives. We might believe that holding on to bitterness or seeking revenge somehow brings us control or justice, but in truth, it only ties us to the pain of the past. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is the act of breaking free from these chains, allowing us to step into a new space of peace, clarity, and freedom. When we forgive, we release not just the person who has wronged us, but also ourselves. We free ourselves from the endless cycle of negative emotions that can haunt us long after the incident has passed. The longer we cling to our anger or bitterness, the more power we give to the person or situation that caused us harm. They continue to have a hold on us, even if they are long gone from our lives. Every time we replay the offense in our minds, we are reliving the hurt, giving it fresh power over us. The truth is, those who have wronged us often move on with their lives, while we remain imprisoned in the past, shackled by our emotions. Forgiveness is, therefore, a radical act of liberation. It is the recognition that the past, with all its wounds, no longer needs to define our present or our future. It is the conscious decision to step away from the victimhood of being hurt and into the empowerment of choosing to heal. It allows us to break the cycle of pain that might otherwise keep repeating itself, making room for growth, understanding, and peace. In forgiving, we allow ourselves to evolve beyond the smallness of vengeance. When we hold on to grudges, we shrink within ourselves. Our thoughts and emotions become consumed by negativity, which limits our potential for joy and fulfillment. Every moment spent brooding over past offenses is a moment wasted, a moment not invested in our own growth, happiness, or the development of deeper, more meaningful connections with others. By forgiving, we expand ourselves. We rise above the trivialities of resentment and anger, opening up to the possibility of peace and grace that would otherwise remain beyond our reach. The act of forgiving, therefore, becomes a step toward personal growth, allowing us to leave behind the small, narrow world of hatred and enter into a broader, richer world of love and understanding. This freedom is not just emotional or psychological, but spiritual in nature. To forgive is to release not just the weight of anger, but to unburden oneself from the need for retribution or control. It is an acknowledgement that some things in life are beyond our capacity to change, but how we respond to those things is entirely within our control. Forgiveness teaches us to relinquish the need to fix everything, to control every outcome, or to impose our own sense of justice upon the world. It encourages us to accept that, while we cannot control what others do, we can always control our response to it. In doing so, we free ourselves from the exhausting cycle of reaction and retaliation. There is a deep paradox within the act of forgiveness. It requires immense strength to forgive, yet in forgiving, we find that the strength was always within us. It is not a sign of weakness to forgive. Rather, it is a sign of a powerful, courageous heart. It takes strength to relinquish the hold that anger, but in the very act of forgiving, we reclaim our power. We choose not to let the actions of another person control us. And in doing so, we assert our own autonomy, our own ability to rise above the pain and the hurt. This freedom is not an instantaneous process. It requires patience, time, and effort. Forgiveness is a journey, one that often takes place in stages. It is normal for emotions to resurface, for old wounds to reopen when we are in the process of forgiving. We might think we have forgiven someone, only to find that the old feelings of anger or betrayal return when triggered. But each time we forgive, we get closer to true freedom. It is like lifting a weight. One of the most profound aspects of forgiveness is that in freeing ourselves from our past hurts, we also free others. By forgiving, we give the people who have wronged us the opportunity to move forward as well. They too are no longer bound by the conflict or the hurt, even if the person who has hurt us does not acknowledge their wrongdoing. The act of forgiveness allows us to let go of our need for them to apologize or make amends. It takes the power away from them and places it firmly back in our hands. It is an acknowledgement that our well-being. In this way, forgiveness becomes not just a personal healing process, but a communal one. It ripples out, affecting not just the one who is forgiven and the one who forgives, but the world around them. When we forgive, we create an atmosphere of grace and understanding that makes it easier for others to do the same. It is a form of rebellion against the cynicism and bitterness that so often govern our interactions, offering instead a vision of a world where people choose peace over conflict, healing over harm. Forgiveness, in its deepest sense, is a return to our truest selves. It reconnects us with the inherent goodness of human nature and reminds us that we are not defined by our wounds or our mistakes, but by our capacity to rise above them. It reveals to us the profound truth that our ability to forgive is what truly defines us, not the wrongs we have suffered or the grudges we may hold. In forgiving, we return to the purity of our own hearts, unburdened by the weight of past pain and free to walk forward with grace, strength, and love. Forgiveness, when fully understood, reveals a profound truth about the nature of humanity. To forgive another is to recognize this shared imperfection, to acknowledge that we are all part of a larger human experience marked by mistakes, failures, and growth. This understanding is essential for forgiveness to truly take root. When we forgive, we do not simply absolve the other person of their wrongs, but we also confront our own humanity. We come face to face with the truth that we too have made mistakes, that we too have hurt others, whether intentionally or not. Our own flaws are as much a part of who we are as the virtues we cherish, and in this recognition, we find the ability to extend mercy to others. It is in seeing the imperfection in another that we can begin to see it in ourselves. We may have been wronged, but we are not immune to wronging others. It is this shared understanding of human frailty that makes forgiveness not just a noble act, but a deeply human one. Forgiveness is also an acknowledgement that there is more to a person than the harm they may have caused us. It requires us to see the whole of the individual, their struggles, their past, their motivations, and not just the moment of injury. This broader view allows us to separate the person from the act. When we are wronged, it is easy to dehumanize the one who has hurt us, to reduce them to the offense they committed, but forgiveness invites us to transcend that reduction, to remember that the person who wronged us is still a complex, evolving human being, capable of growth and change. At its core, forgiveness is not about excusing bad behavior or pretending that harm hasn't been done. It challenges us to look beyond the hurt to the humanity beneath, to respond not with more harm, but with a recognition of shared suffering and shared potential for growth. When we forgive, we also begin to see that the other person's actions are often a reflection of their own pain, their own struggles, or their own weaknesses. Hurt people, as the saying goes. It enables us to step back from the immediate emotional reaction and consider the broader context of their behavior. This shift in perspective doesn't diminish the reality of the hurt, but it allows us to let go of the desire for retribution or judgment. Instead of focusing on the wrong itself, We begin to focus on the person's potential for change and healing. This view of forgiveness is powerful because it breaks the cycle of harm. When we view another's actions through the lens of their own imperfections, we are less likely to perpetuate the hurt. If we can stop seeing them as one-dimensional offenders and start seeing them as complex individuals, it becomes easier to release our anger and resentment. In this way, forgiveness becomes a tool for breaking the patterns of pain that so often repeat themselves, and instead opens up the possibility for true healing and reconciliation. Forgiveness also calls on us to embrace humility. It asks us to recognize that we too are in need of forgiveness from others. None of us is without fault, and none of us moves through life without causing harm at some point. This recognition is not to make us feel guilty, but rather to remind us that forgiveness is a two-way street. Just as we ask for grace from others, we are called to extend it ourselves. The act of forgiving, then, becomes not just a response to another's wrongs, but also an acknowledgement of our own need for grace, understanding, and redemption. It brings us closer to the realization that, in the end, we are all connected by our shared need for compassion and our mutual struggles to live justly in a broken world. Forgiveness operates at a level beyond simple justice, and therein lies its transformative power. In the world we inhabit, justice is often seen as a straightforward matter of right and wrong. An eye for an eye, a wrong to be righted, and a debt to be paid. This view of justice is deeply rooted in the human instinct to demand fairness and retribution, and it is certainly a necessary force in many aspects of society. Without a sense of justice, there would be chaos, and the weak would remain vulnerable to the strong. But there is another realm of justice, one that operates on a higher plane, one that transcends the immediate desire for vengeance or reparation. This is the justice that comes with forgiveness, a justice that is not bound by the rigid constraints of an eye for an eye, but by the deeper, more profound call of healing, reconciliation, and grace. When we speak of justice in its raw form, it often seeks to balance the scales, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This form of justice seeks to restore a perceived imbalance between individuals, making sure that the wronged party receives compensation in equal measure to the harm that was done. There is a certain logic to this approach, and it makes sense within the confines of the material world. But the trouble with this form of justice is that it often leads to further cycles of harm. It operates on the principle of retaliation, which only deepens the wounds between individuals and continues to perpetuate cycles of bitterness and resentment. As soon as we adopt this principle, we find ourselves trapped within it, forever trying to correct wrongs and restore a sense of balance, without ever truly addressing the deeper issues that underlie the conflict. Forgiveness, in contrast, operates on an entirely different plane. It asks us to relinquish the need for exacting retribution. Instead of demanding equal compensation or punishment, it invites us to look beyond the wrongdoing itself and see the broader, more complex picture. Forgiveness acknowledges that there is much more at play than the actions of an individual. It recognizes that the world is full of brokenness, that people make mistakes, and that those mistakes are often a reflection of pain or ignorance rather than malice. When we forgive, we do not ignore the wrong that has been done, but we release our hold on the need to balance the scales in a way that would cause more. There is a profound shift that occurs when we choose forgiveness over justice. It is the shift from retribution to restoration. Forgiveness invites us to move from a mindset of punishment to one of healing. It calls us to recognize that, while justice may correct an external wrong, only forgiveness can restore the internal peace that has been disturbed. The pain caused by an offense is not erased by retribution, it is only magnified. Justice, in the traditional sense, can sometimes feel like an end in itself. Once the scales are balanced, the matter is considered closed. In this sense, forgiveness is an act of liberation. It is a release of the hold that the wrongdoer has over us. It allows us to let go of the anger, resentment, and bitterness that threaten to consume us. By doing so, forgiveness opens the door to a future that is no longer defined by the past, allowing us to move forward in peace. Moreover, forgiveness fosters the potential for true reconciliation. While justice may resolve the conflict at a surface level, it rarely fosters the kind of understanding necessary for genuine healing to take place between individuals. Forgiveness allows space for dialogue, empathy, and growth. It creates the conditions for individuals to understand each other's perspectives, to listen to each other's stories, and to work toward mutual healing. Without forgiveness, relationships are often left fractured and strained, even when justice has been served. One of the most challenging aspects of forgiveness is that it requires us to relinquish our control over the situation. Justice, in its traditional sense, allows us to feel like we are regaining power. We are correcting the wrong, reasserting our dignity, and claiming what is ours. Forgiveness, on the other hand, often feels like an act of surrender. We are not in control of the outcome. The person who wronged us may never acknowledge their actions, may never apologize, and may never seek reconciliation. Yet in forgiving them, we free ourselves from the need for them to meet our expectations. We let go of our desire for a specific outcome and embrace the unknowns of the future. This is perhaps the most profound act of strength in forgiveness. It asks us to release our need for closure, for compensation, or for retribution, and instead trust in the healing power of mercy. When we forgive, we also open the door to self-reflection. The act of forgiving another challenges us to examine our own capacity for compassion and understanding. We are reminded that we too are imperfect and that we too have fallen short in our dealings with others. This understanding doesn't diminish the validity of our hurt, but it humbles us, enabling us to see the humanity in both the offender and the offended. In choosing forgiveness over the pursuit of rigid justice, we open ourselves to a higher form of healing. We choose a path that acknowledges both the complexity of human nature and the need for mercy. Forgiveness allows us to move beyond the confines of what is fair and instead focus on what is truly transformative, the power of compassion. Forgiveness has the remarkable ability to transform not only our relationships, but also our very selves. It is an act that goes beyond the resolution of a single conflict. It has the power to reshape our hearts and minds in ways we may not even fully understand. When we forgive, we break the chains that bind us to the past, freeing ourselves from the emotional and psychological weight of resentment, anger, and pain. But the transformation that comes from forgiveness is not limited to merely releasing these negative emotions. It opens up the possibility for growth, for deeper empathy, and for a future that is no longer constrained by the wrongs done to us. At its core, forgiveness is a process of letting go of the need to be right, of letting go of the desire for revenge, and of letting go of the constant replaying of past wrongs in our minds. We often think of forgiveness as something we offer to others, but in truth, it is just as much an offering to ourselves. It is a release, not only of the person who has hurt us, but also of our own hold on the pain and anger that we carry. When we refuse to forgive, we become prisoners of our emotions, locked in a cycle of bitterness that affects not only our thoughts, but also our physical and emotional well-being. Forgiveness also opens the door to a deeper understanding of others. When we forgive, we move beyond the immediate hurt and begin to see the person who wronged us as a human being, just like ourselves. However, when we forgive, we remind ourselves that this person is more than the harm they caused. They too are imperfect, and they too are on their own journey of growth and self-discovery. Forgiveness allows us to recognize the humanity in others, to see their struggles and vulnerabilities, and to understand that they may have acted out of their own pain, fear, or ignorance. This understanding does not excuse their behavior, but it provides the space for empathy, for a more nuanced perspective that allows us to view them with compassion rather than judgment. In addition to fostering empathy, forgiveness also creates the opportunity for emotional healing. It is not only the person we forgive who is healed, we too are healed in the process. The act of forgiving releases the emotional burdens we carry, which often prevent us from fully engaging with our own lives and the people around us. Resentment is a weight that, when held for too long, can prevent us from experiencing joy, from embracing new opportunities, and from cultivating meaningful relationships. It keeps us trapped in the past, holding on to old wounds and preventing us from moving forward. But when we forgive, we let go of that weight, allowing ourselves to experience the fullness of life once again. Forgiveness makes room for new possibilities, new growth, and new connections, both with others and with ourselves. Moreover, forgiveness is a powerful catalyst for personal growth. It forces us to confront our own weaknesses, our own imperfections, and our own capacity for pain. In forgiving others, we come face to face with our own capacity for grace, for understanding, and for letting go of the need to control or manipulate a situation. It challenges us to rise above the smallness of revenge and retaliation, and to move toward a higher, more compassionate form of justice. This growth is not easy, and it is not always immediate. Forgiveness is often a process that takes time, patience, and a willingness to confront our emotions head-on. But with each step, we become more resilient, more capable of seeing beyond our own hurt, and more able to embrace the complexity of human relationships. Ultimately, forgiveness transforms not only the person who is forgiven, but also the one who forgives. It allows us to break free from the cycle of hurt and retribution, replacing it with a cycle of healing and growth. In doing so, we become more whole, more compassionate, and more connected to the world around us. Through forgiveness, we open the door to the possibility of a richer, more fulfilling life, one in which we are not defined by the wrongs done to us, but by our capacity to heal, to grow, and to love